So, hi and welcome everyone. Today's seminar is slightly different. We, compared to our typical research seminars, we have Professor Charles Meneveau from Johns Hopkins University, also the JFM Deputy Editor, who will be introducing JFM Notebooks. I will pass on to him without any further introduction.
Thanks very much, Asadeh. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to introduce the notebooks to you. This is something new at JFM that we've been working on actually for quite a long time. And so before I get started, I should probably point out the people who really made it happen at Cambridge University Press, the publisher of JFM, Anna Simpson and Peter White worked very hard. And then CoCalc, this is the company, William Stein was very helpful. And then the prior two, I guess the prior and the current editor-in-chiefs were very supportive, Gray Wooster and Colm Caulfield from Cambridge University really were supporting this for a number of years. And then finally, we kind of made it happen. And then some early adopters that I will mention as I go along. So so this is going to, as Asadeh mentioned, this is going to be a little different. It's not a research seminar, but I still have a few slides with some kind of theoretical motivations for this. So kind of more general thoughts about it. So I'll probably spend about 10 to 15 minutes on these sort of general thoughts, and then I'll simply show you in a perhaps hopefully in an interactive manner how this works and what one can do with it. So if you're sitting on a computer later on, I might actually ask you to click around on things and try things out as I show them myself on the screen. But anyway, first sort of the general thoughts, and for this it's probably useful to think about, and now I'm trying to click on the slide and let's see if this, yeah, so to think about kind of scientific publishing, and these are thoughts that we had written down in this editorial that was published, I guess, slightly over a year ago in JFM, where this was introduced for the first time. So the thought process really is like this, and we all know this in some sense, that scientific publishing has relied on two-dimensional objects, pages, for centuries now. There's Newton's Principia here, there's Osborne Reynolds' paper on turbulence, there are JFM, the various incarnations of JFM printed, then printed again, more modern versions, and now not printed at all, but only online on a computer screen, but it's still two-dimensional. And on the two-dimensional page, we're transmitting information via text, via graphs, photos, maybe 3D views, but they'll be static and kind of sitting there. And again, this could be either in print and online. And one would like to say that this has been particularly successful, these two-dimensional pages, in scaling up one-to-one interactions among scientists. So typically, you might sit, somebody might be giving a lecture. I have a photograph of Professor Stanley Courson at Johns Hopkins explaining a wind tunnel. He'd be standing there explaining a grid, turbulence on a blackboard with chalk, and there's speech, and there's a sketch. And I might be sitting here, but if you want to scale that up, that interaction, scale it up to thousands of people, the two-dimensional page in journal papers has been particularly effective and has been very successful in scaling up this kind of interaction between scientists. So one-to-one interactions can be scaled up to thousands of journal readers, essentially with two-dimensional pages, and it's been very successful doing that. Now, if you think about how currently we interact, scientists will interact in addition to the previously mentioned approach. Typically, there'll be possibly an open laptop. There might be an interactive manipulation. Somebody might move an image. Somebody might be wanting to change a threshold on a figure to convince you of something. Looking at it from the other side, maybe there'll be an animation being played back and forth and replayed. And it's, I would say, one-to-one interactions are very much enriched by this kind of interaction. And now the question is, this is still one-on-one. How do you scale that up? And you could be looking at a YouTube video, but it's sort of a passive way. How do you scale up this kind of interactions? And how do you do that through papers? Let's say a JFM paper. How can that be scaled up to a massive readership of JFM? So that's what this responds to. And so I'll be talking about these notebooks that have been recently introduced. They have several aspects that are really important. One, they're very timely because of all the emphasis on open science. As you'll see, this is really a very natural and easy way to enhance the openness in science, simply because we're going to have the data available for everyone to manipulate data that's been put in these notebooks, as well as the procedures and the algorithms that analyze them. It's much more open if it's part of a Jupyter of a notebook. Funding agencies, of course, also insist on this and are starting to insist even more. These are interactive. Again, I'll be talking about Jupyter Notebooks. There are several options in terms of what language, what platforms to use, what environments, what kind of programming language, and so on. We chose ultimately Jupyter Notebooks because it's open software, unlike MATLAB, for example, which is paid and proprietary. So this gave us more flexibility, and we believe is going to be more accessible long term. And it's also its popularity certainly is rising. Now, where to host these notebooks? There's many cloud-based services. There's CodeOcean, there's CoCalc, there's ones that you might have at your university. After a lengthy process, Cambridge University Press decided to go with a company called CoCalc. They also are in a deal to use them for a number of books that Cambridge University is publishing using these notebooks. So we thought for JFM, it would make a lot of sense to team up with them as well. So we're having this cloud-based hosting service for computational notebooks by CoCalc. Okay, so that's what it is. Now, in terms of procedures, before I illustrate how to read a paper with notebooks and how to deal with it and how to interact with it, let me just summarize very briefly how, as an author, you would proceed. And I think this is quite crucial. Essentially, authors have to put a little bit of effort to using this. It's not entirely easy, but I think it's been streamlined enough that it's really ready for prime time. So you create an account. There's a free account version on CoCalc. It's the usual thing. You click on some buttons, put some username and password and so on, and there you have it. So it's a website like that. Then, as part of that, you create a project. You could call it Figures for a JFM Paper. As part of that project, then you create subfolders. Could be Figure 1, Figure 2, Figure 3. And then there's a button to click to make it public. So others that you decide, or initially people you give the link to, could access it. And then you work on your notebook. For example, you could copy a sample notebook from an existing paper. If you think, oh, this is close enough to what I want to do, you just copy it onto your environment and you edit it. It's probably the easiest way to do it. As part of that notebook, there'll be the JFM logo, which is part of it, just for sort of branding and visual clarity that this belongs to JFM. And then you write your notebook. You might copy there the data that's needed. For example, to generate a figure, you might need data that you put it also in that subdirectory for this figure, or another directory just with data. You work on the notebook, you create the figures, you iterate, you fix it. The folder can also contain HTML files and other things for animations, so that's quite useful. Then you essentially contact JFM and you get you share with them this folder, and you will then get a URL address of this public folder, and that gets embedded into your preprint for your paper. So you will generate your JFM paper. You'll be writing your paper. Let's say one of the figures you want to associate with a computational notebook. In that, when you generate the text, you will embed the link to this notebook into your paper, and then of course into the PDF as it's being generated. And then you just submit as usual to JFM the PDF of your document, which has embedded the links to these notebooks, as you would like the reader finally to have access to these notebooks when the paper is ultimately published, if it's accepted. The editor and the referees will evaluate the functionality and the science content of the notebooks. So the notebooks are not meant to just be there just because it's fancy or anything. They really have to add understanding to the figures, and we believe very often they will do that. So that's necessary, and of course they have to work. And then so the notebooks are evaluated by the referees. So we're asking referees to have a look and click around and see if they work. They can be revised during the review process, as usual with a JFM paper. There's going to be a review process, very thorough, and the referees might have suggestions, might say, "Oh no, this is I don't like it," or "This is great, and then why don't you add this," and so on. You can just go back to your account and edit the notebook, and then for the revised version, it'll just have that the same link will go to the revised notebook. And once it's published, if the paper is accepted, then it becomes it's hosted for a long time at CoCalc, and longevity is assured simply because they really spent quite a long time hammering out contracts and long term, and what happens if a company goes under, and so then things get copied, and Cambridge University Press retains all the rights, can put it elsewhere. So we believe it's quite robust, and this is a long-term thing, as are pretty much all things at Cambridge University Press. So let me show you some examples now of things that have already been published using computational notebooks. Let me start with the first one, which is the editorial itself that had a few sort of showcase examples. And now before I actually do it and close the presentation, let me just continue with 3 more slides that will show you what I'll show you sort of with a demo, just in case, who knows, the internet goes down or something crazy like this. Let me just show you with slides. So in this paper, in this JFM editorial, there's a figure 1, and it has the familiar logarithmic and viscous, essentially law of the wall for DNS of channel flow turbulence. There's 2 data sets here. There's one at RE tau of 1,000, another one that's 5,000. These are the red and green lines. And then in addition, there's a model, actually 3. One is the viscous sublayer linear, which is plotted in log units, a dotted line. The log law with some fitted constants is the usual dashed line. And then there's a solid line that merges the 2 in some proposed fit. Okay, so that's the thing. So the reader will find this figure, but then it's part of the figure caption is this link, which, as you can see here, goes to Cambridge or something figure 1. This link right now is the final one of the published paper. When you submit the paper, when you're preparing it, you will have a temporary link when it's still a preprint, but it'll look similar to this. This is what you want it to look like. So then if you're reading the PDF version, let's say, of the paper, you'll click on this, and then what you're going to get is something like this, which is a directory that has a bunch of stuff now. As you can see, this is now still part of JFM. It has the logos there and so on, but this is a directory that has the notebook and has the logo and has a bunch of data files, which has the mean velocity, and then has the 2 data sets as well, the RE tau 1,000, 5,000. Those are the profiles, and then this is the mean velocity data as well. So anyway, that's one example, and I'll show this. You can click on this, and then you go essentially to the notebook. So this is a notebook itself. This is all there is. It reads in data from the profiles. It selects some model constants and then makes a plot. And this is the plot that was in the paper, but here's the plot here, and I'll show you how to interact with it in a little while. But this is how it would look to you if you just click on things. Here's another figure from this editorial, which is a 3-dimensional visualization. And again, this is the classic way you would show a 3D. Maybe there's some turbulence worms with Q criterion, and then some volume rendering of kinetic energy of turbulence. Again, this is from isotropic turbulence. And the figure caption now actually has 2 things. One has the figure itself has a notebook, which is the second one. And then it also has another one, which if you click on it, it has this HTML version. And then if you click on it, you end up with this figure. And this one you can now interactively rotate and zoom in and change thresholds and so on. Again, this is now, part of the the CoCalc environment. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to quit the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to go into the PDF of these papers. Let me just maybe check with some of you whether you still can see me and hear me, and if things are still working all right.
Yes,
all good.
Okay.
Okay. Azadeh is nodding and Aman is nodding. Sounds good. So let's see. So what I want to do next is I want to go into so this is PDF Acrobat Reader, but it could be any PDF reader. And this is that editorial paper. Okay, so there's a PDF of the paper. This is like a paper, and here's the sort of text that I described about the rationale and so on. And here's that first figure. So you can you see the figure one? So here's figure one, and here's the figure caption. And what I'm going to do now is so this is my mouse. I hope you can see my mouse. I'm moving it from left to right. Now I'm going up, and here's the link. And I'm going to click on the link. And of course, I hope things will work. So it's opening a web page. So you can see it flipped from Cambridge University Press to CoCalc. And here's that directory that I was talking to you about, okay? And if I just click on this, for example, I'll have the notebook. Okay, here's the notebook. Now this notebook, I'm sorry, I have an automatic light which turns off automatically if I don't move. I should probably move a little more. So this notebook is the published version. Okay, this is what's and there's an image that right now you can't see because I haven't executed this this notebook. But this is a notebook. And this is static. This doesn't, nobody can change this. This is part of the paper. For me to interact with it, I need to essentially edit my own copy. So I just click here, and this is going to take a while because I'm logged in as an anonymous user, and so I click on edit your own copy, create a new project, and essentially this is now copying all the files from this repository into my account on CoCalc. Okay, so this is what's happening right now. It's creating a sort of a temporary directory that is under my command, and I as a reader, so any reader can do this. So in fact, what I would like to do before I race ahead too quickly is invite you to look at the chat. So the chat has links to the JFM papers that I'm talking about. So the first one is the notebooks. So if you don't mind, if you're interested, you could just click on this first one here that somehow I might not be able to click on it because this is the screen that I'm sharing, or maybe I can, I don't know. I don't know if that works. So the idea would be for you to click on this and then essentially go to the JFM paper, which is this one. So if you open it in a PDF file, I guess you have to go to the JFM page and then download the PDF of the paper. But this, if you can do that while I present, that'd be great. And then you can go to figure one and do this business that I was talking about. And if anyone has a question while doing this, we can do this somewhat interactive because we have plenty of time, and we can make it fun that way. So let me continue, but just make noise if you have any questions or trouble accessing this. There's a small enough number of people on the call that we can actually afford to do it interactively if you want. So remember, I went to the paper, I clicked on the figure caption of the PDF, and then I had the static version, then I clicked on edit, and now I have my own version. And now I can essentially execute this window here, and again, startup takes a little bit of time because again, I just started this, so it needs to start some processes and what have you not. But at some point, this is going to start executing, and then it'll generate the figure. So it'll generate the same figure that's in the paper if I don't make any changes. So I need to wait till this thing. So now it's executing. You see this spinning red green thing, and here's the figure. Okay, so this is the figure that's in the paper. Now I can change things. I don't know what is your favorite kappa and B for, I don't know, Julio. Do you have I think Julio is on the call. Any favorite value of kappa and B that you want me to try here? Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot, but let me do something.
I can't see the values because they're very small on my iPad.
Oh, you're on the iPad. Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the iPad, so I can't actually interact with you.
All right, that's okay. That's all right. So I'm going to assume that that you went a little non-conventional, and you're proposing that kappa is really 0.8, and actually let's make it much worse so that the figure is going to show, and that b is 8. Okay. I know this is crazy, but now I can essentially regenerate the figure with these crazy values. You see, and now the data is here, but now this model that I am proposing, I'm not blaming Julio for this, is of course doesn't agree at all with the data. But you see how I can now manipulate and quickly change things very simply. You know, I could, for example, I don't know, maybe I multiply. I don't know. I multiply one of the axes by 5 and see what happens, and then I rerun. Anyway, so I can, you know, crazy stuff happens, right? So I can interact with the figure. I can interact with the data. I can download the data because the data now I have it here on this environment essentially. So yeah. So if I, for example, here I can go here back to this directory that had data. So you can see here. Well, okay, here this. I clicked on the notebook, but anyway, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so this is the first example I wanted to show. That has to do with this with the notebooks from this paper. The second one is still from the paper. And now that you can see how I can interact with it, so let me go back to my PDF reader. So this is again that introductory. So there was another. So again, here's explained a little bit on the screen. Here's this example of the 3D visualization with the worms and the isosurface. I mean the volume rendering and so on. And again, if I click on the second one, I'm going to go to the directory that has the data. So these are MATLAB generated files that have been plotted with a 3D volume rendering software called K3D. So it's part of Python, and there's two things being generated: the isosurface, the Q isosurface, and this volume rendering. So these are the commands. Again, this is the notebook. That's what it takes to generate that 3D figure. I'm going to close this again. But in addition, I can actually have in the same directory, there's this HTML object, which is this figure, but in 3D. So now if I click on this one, you'll see so this is an HTML object that was generated with this 3-dimensional figure generation software, which you can see. I hope you can see it on my screen. It's the same figure, but now you see with my mouse, I can rotate it. You see, I can now interactively look at it from different sides. I can zoom in. I can rotate it after zooming in. So this is still the figure. This is still the JFM figure. Again, that's part of this, but it's interactive. I can act on it. This particular 3D volume rendering and surface plot software has a nice feature that I can actually change thresholds. So as part of this figure, I can even go in, for example, isotropic, iso Q surface. Right now it's using a threshold of 500. So these are the units of the simulation. If I want to only emphasize the very strongest vortices, maybe I can put 2000. So here are the strongest vortices with a threshold of 2000, or let's say 200. Now it's a mess, you see. I can even put negative numbers, which is going to be even more negative because more messy, because now it's the space filling parts of this strain dominated region. Anyway, with 500 you see these worms. With 1000 you see less worms, but these are the more intense ones. So that's changing the threshold. This volume rendering sort of 3D transparency stuff. I can also, there's a bunch of parameters that I can change here. The transparent, like this volume, this maximum value here is 8. I don't know what happens if I do 12. It changes the colors a little bit. Here's I put 0. Ooh, maybe that's so I can interact and change features of this 3D rendering by simply clicking on the JFM figure and so this, I believe this really enriches this figure a lot. Again, what you have done is you have generated MATLAB pictures, MATLAB files that have in this case, the energy, the 3D energy. So this is, I think, on a 256 or 128 cube, I forget. It has the Q here and has the XYZ, the grid, and then has the notebook itself. So, and then this is this HTML object that also I can just put in here. So that's as far as interactivity of three-dimensional figures that I believe is really enriches a figure like this. You could imagine if you're an experimentalist and you want to describe a CAD of an experimental setup, you could generate a CAD model, put it like this with a view in the paper, but then allow the reader to rotate it and see the mechanism and maybe the measurement techniques from all possible angles. Be much better, I believe. Maybe at this point, can I just ask if anyone has managed to click and log, and sort of get to the notebooks? If not, it's okay. No pressure, but just curious.
Yep, no problem.
I was able to go there, but I couldn't run it. So let me try.
Okay, so yeah, this interactive version that I just showed, you don't need to run any. That's just that object, the HTML. But okay, thanks. I got some thumbs up. Again, anyway. I'll show some other examples, but please feel free if there's some questions. Okay, Julio is also able. That's excellent. So let me show you the second example, which is from a paper that, as a matter of fact, if you're in Monash, I will be describing this paper tomorrow at a seminar. But here I'll just show the notebook. So this is a paper on wall modeling for large eddy simulations from last year, and there's a physical model that I'm going to jump over all these equations and so on. We have applied this model to channel flow with sinusoidally varying pressure gradients. So it's a flow that has a bunch of time scales. And as first, I wanted to show that the mean flow, the phase average mean flow, is well predicted, and it's time dependent because of these phases. Okay, so the paper has a figure like this, which has, I guess in this case, for different frequencies, it has amplitudes, which is this one, and has the phase here, and it's kind of sinusoidal. So this is one way to show it. But here's another way to show this time-dependent behavior with essentially a little animation that goes with the figure in the paper, but is showing you how things move periodically and how the model behaves at various frequencies. This is all normalized by the period, so they all seem to be moving at the same frequency. But essentially, here we're comparing DNS with a wall model, with an equilibrium wall model, and a laminar Neowald solution. Again, I believe it's pretty clear that this kind of plot conveys a lot more information than simply a bunch of profiles. Here's another example from that paper. So here are we have all the stresses, the Reynolds stresses, the resolved Reynolds stresses, UV, U square, U prime square, V prime square, and so on and so forth, for different forcing frequencies. And this is a little cumbersome to be looking at. And I can look at these various profiles, for example, at the different frequencies here. So these are different stresses now. This is, I believe, UV, UU, VV, WW for one of the forcing frequencies. And the DNS is the dashed line. So you can start seeing some problems with the model. Our model is the solid lines, the solid circles, sorry. The equilibrium wall model is the dot dashed line, predicting a little bit worse, I think, this time dependent. But again, the logic here is simply that having this as part of the paper, I believe, enriches a lot how much you can express and convey to the reader. Again, I'm reading the JFM paper. If I'm connected on the internet, I just click on one of these, and here it is, right? So it's not, I don't have to log on or anything. This is just clicking and seeing an animation that goes with the figure. Again, in the past, we were able to do this with supplementary materials, but that you had to click a number of times, and supplementary materials never quite felt integral part of the paper. And this is what we're trying to accomplish with this, that it really becomes part of the refereeing process and sort of the high quality of each of the figures in the paper. This shows you these time-dependent profiles, gives you an idea that can be done. You can do, of course, time-dependent contours. Here's one, for example, for various aspects of this is the model now applied to a channel flow with a suddenly applied sideways pressure gradient, so the flow starts turning. So you can do you can visualize various portions of the model, the total, the slow part, the fast part, and so on. And so you can convey to the reader, again, by means of a single click, this time dependency and this time evolution. Here's another example that I think is useful, is to explain the model itself. There is a bit of a sketch here. So the paper has, figure 27 is this, because this is an assumed profile between the first grid point and the wall in this particular wall model that assumes a particular shape of the profile. So we've shown the profile, but there's various profile components and various parts. And so, okay, I can see a perspective plot here, okay. But if I click on the HTML object that was, again, generated by the notebook, I get to this position here, and then I can animate this using input data from the actual LES. So now if you see what I'm doing here is I'm actually playing a movie of the assumed profile at a given point in the flow that uses as input the time-dependent fluctuating velocities from the LES. And if I don't like this view, I can, just like before, this is a 3D, this is a 3D visualization software. So I can look at it from the top, from behind. I can essentially rotate this. This becomes a rotatable object that I can look from each side, and I believe it's kind of tutorial. In fact, from here you can see that the assumed profile is not actually in the same plane. It allows you to include a little bit of veer and skew in the assumed model profile. Anyway, that's another animation / explanation of what can be done. And again, the notebook to generate this object is here it is. This is the notebook. So it's a little longer because it has all these lines and these different models. So this is a more heavy-handed Python code that one has to write. But and again, I can copy it into my thing and edit and change things as before. All right, so that's for this paper. I wanted to show you a few other examples. For this, I need to see this. Okay, so here's, just very briefly, here's another paper where, let's see, somewhere in the back, we're looking at a visualization of some feature of vorticity transport in turbulent boundary layer. That is, data have been filtered in a particular way in spectral space, brought back to physical space. And we've discovered, or we found, these kind of pancake-like structures that are that dominate some of the transport. That's technical stuff in this paper. This is a paper with Greg Eink. And again, I click on this HTML object that's part of the in the figure caption. And here's again this object that I can now, I can zoom in. I can look at these pancakes from various directions, and I can get a better sense of what they look like. Right? And so again, I believe this is more expressive than just looking at a thing like this. And again, the notebook, I click on it. Here's the notebook. That's all it is. It really, again, it imports a MATLAB type file and just visualizes it. That's the notebook. If I want to edit this, again, I would go and edit my own copy and then rerun it, which right now, let me not do that. Here's another example. There's a very recent paper on things that related with energy cascade, some structure function, some math, and so here, for example, is a figure that calculated a PDF of kinetic energy and energy transfer rate. Again, I click on it. This is again the notebook. Here, here's a notebook that reads data that's in another directory that I also have access to. So here's the path. Here's this notebook. It reads, and so on. If I want to edit this, again, I have to click on Edit Copy, and then it copies. By the way, when you edit your own copy, it doesn't just copy the notebook itself. It copies the entire paper's infrastructure, all the data sets, everything into this directory structure so that a notebook can call the data. Otherwise, it would crash and if it doesn't find the data. So you just need to do one of these. And this one is quite heavy. There's a lot of 2 million points here. So these are many megabytes of data. Let's see. Here's another 3D example that let me just show you just because it's kind of cool. This is again, so panel A, I click on it, and this shows simultaneously the Q criterion again in yellow, the energy cascade rate in blue. This is how much energy is going from large to small scale at some length scale, and the gray, the dark grayish regions are regions of high positive R. And so those are the vortex compression regions. Actually, I'm sorry, the blue regions here are actually negative. These are backscattering regions. So we in this paper, we find that the regions of inverse cascade are strongly correlated with the presence of vortices that are being compressed by the large scales. Again, I can go in here and change thresholds, for example. Let's see, this is not the controls, but the object. So for example, Q, if instead of 20, if I put the 40, I think I'm going to get more of these. Yeah, so fatter, smaller one. If I just put the 0, I guess I get nonsense. If I reduce the threshold to 5, I get thicker vortices and so on. You get the picture. So again, an object that is much easier to understand than a simple static view like this. Maybe the last example is simply from somebody else's paper. This is something from Elizabeth Guazelli's group in France. They published this paper. I just noticed this a few days ago, and as part of one of their figures. So I'm in a way, because I wasn't involved in generating this, I have no idea what it means or what it represents. But here's a figure. Right? They have a lot of nice little colors and so on, a lot of data, some lines, some models. R seems to be in logarithmic units, and these are log plots on the right. So so the notebooks is here. So I'll just click on it, and so here's the notebook. So you can see there's some initialization, some plotting thing, loading the data, defining the function. So again, this is heavy, sort of serious Python code, and then plotting the figure with all the labels and everything. And here's the figure that appears in the paper is part of the notebook. Okay, let's say I don't like log plots, which is not the case, but suppose I wanted to plot this in linear units. Oh, the authors are showing this in log because who knows? So I want to see this in linear units. Okay, now I will edit, copy, create a new project. So those are 2 steps. You edit, copy, and then you create a new project that has that name and now lives in your own environment. And again, this takes a little bit. You have the spinning wheel kind of patience. And what it'll do is it'll have, again, I believe, a directory, or maybe in this case, it goes directly to the notebook. Yeah, so here's directly the notebook itself because I clicked on that. And yeah, so let me just get started executing it. Let's try it because, so here's the entire notebook if I scroll down. So again, this takes time to initialize. At some point, you're going to get that spinning green wheel. Let's wait till, okay, so it just executed it. So I'm going to execute the next one. So let me execute the entire notebook, clicking through, defining functions, labels, and then plot the figure. And here's the figure. So this is what it just did. And here's where I say, I want this in linear, not log units. Okay. Now I believe in Python, all you need to change is wherever it says log, put, write linear. Let's see. So I see some logs here. So I will put linear. I hope this is probably pretty small. I hope it's visible what I'm doing, but I'm changing where it says X scale and Y scale. I'm changing it to linear. Here's another, 2 other logs, linear, and I think there was a total of 5 axes because there were 3 plots and there's 5 axes. So I should find another one where it says log. Maybe further up. Sorry. Okay, here it is. Yeah. So I want linear. Okay. Let me run this. And here's the figure with with this in linear units, if this would please. Okay, so it's doing some computations apparently. So this is, I guess it's calculating a bunch of things. It's not evaluating logarithms, but it's doing other things. So apparently there's quite a bit of operations that are needed. So that's why this is taking a little bit of time. And now it says it's done. Okay, so here you have it. So R is now in linear units here, and on these two plots, these are not linear units. Maybe the authors were right. Maybe showing this in log was more informative. But anyway, here I've manipulated the figure, and you can imagine now I can go in and change the color of any of these, or who knows what. So so many options to interact with figures, show things differently. I now have, you see, I now have data. I have access to whatever data was used to generate this. Because it's now in my environment, and I can copy and I can edit and I can interact with the data much more actively. So maybe this is a place for me to stop and see if there's questions and comments and suggestions. This is an evolving project. In some sense, we're heavily reliant on users to try it and then and let us know, you know, how to evolve this. This is, I believe also JFM really is the first journal that I'm aware of where this is getting started. I think it's the way to go. Again, those of you who have funding from government agencies in most countries, they are becoming more and more insistent of that the data should be made available. And I believe this is an easy way, because now it's not, you don't have to create some separate repository in your university. How that's connected to the paper until people find it, it's actually a nightmare. Whereas this, it becomes naturally part of the published paper, and then you can just tell the funding agency all the data that was needed for this paper is available as part of the paper. So it's all in one. Maybe let me close with before we go to questions, a few remarks. You can select, just like here, you can choose which figure to have notebooks. There's no requirement. JFM is not moving to, oh, we'll force every author to have all the figures with notebooks. That's not the objective at all. It's something to enrich and allow authors and readers to benefit from, but it's not a requirement at all. Yeah, maybe that's an important thing to clarify. And maybe with that, let me stop and take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was actually very interesting, especially to see it in action. We do have a comment from Lorenzo. I don't know if Lorenzo, you would like to speak. You could just turn on your microphone, or we could just read through the chat as well.
Yes, I can definitely. So yes, thanks for the talk. It's very interesting. And so the general comment was that all this talk that you've been giving really reminds me this concept of literature programming by Knut and the followers, which is the idea of combining code, text, results, post-processing in order to improve this reproducibility and transparency of the scientific production. So, and I really like, because I'm advocating since many years and trying to inject all this in my workflow. So the question is, there are already tools which combine all the elements which you mentioned in your talk, such as, for example, R or RStudio. In principle, I usually write, for example, papers directly in RStudio and put in code, running code and post-processing directly the results from there, and eventually publishing as well in there, in that project. So the question is, have you considered this option, and yes or no, why? Thanks.
Right. I think you're quite right about the general direction. I think, as you say, in some measure, these tools are available. My view is that that's a kind of a step too far to get started. In other words, I think it's because now you have to do the entire paper this way, and I believe it's probably too ambitious at the beginning. And so this is I consider this as doable. This is doable now, and I think is more agreeable to the community. Because right now, if we were to say, okay, JFM paper, you have to write the entire paper with R, with the embedded code for every figure, I think it would just not take off. But the idea, philosophically, it's very much in line with what you're saying. It's just a degree of practical implementation.
Another question related to the amount of data which is allowed. So for this 3D rendering or 3D visualizations, usually you would require big data sets. So is there a limit on the amount of data?
Yeah, so I can tell you what the practical aspect. Right now, it's, I would say a notebook runs smoothly like the ones I showed. I mean, you had to wait a few seconds, but the wait time, the lag time of the demos I showed was not really a lag time due to copying large amounts. It was more, I'm an anonymous user. I'm not paying anything. The system just doesn't immediately give me access to the CPUs and so on. So there's sort of a dead lead time there that I hope will get better as more people get subscriptions and so on. But right now, I don't think this is IO bound. But right now, to give you an idea, the examples I showed were typically less than 100 megabytes. So I would say this all works quite smoothly when stuff that's there is on the order of hundreds of, few hundreds or tens to hundreds of megabytes. As soon as it gets longer than that, then and more data, then we start having issues and it's slow and so on. So the notion here really is not. Oops, sorry. I think I need to move. Sorry, this is the automatic light system that Aman probably knows here at the Uni Melbourne. We're saving electricity, I suppose. But anyway, so the idea is that these plots, the figures, this is really already pre-processed data, right? So the idea here is not to put the 1,000 cube DNS data on a notebook and then or have a DNS code run as part of the notebooks. That is not the idea. The idea is it's that last step where you go from already processed data that may be tens of megabytes at most to the figure that's in the paper. It's that last step where I think the notebooks and this might be useful. But again, the idea is not to have full DNS codes. That would just not be practical. Yeah, but in terms of size of data and memory, that is rapidly evolving, right? Whatever numbers I'm giving you now, 5 years from now might be trivial, and the system will evolve naturally. But right now, all the examples I showed you, even with a 3D rotation and so on, that file, that HTML file that had the 3D picture with all the thresholds and everything, that was about 40 megabytes. So that's a 40 megabyte HTML file. So when I clicked on it, it downloaded onto my browser 40 megabytes, and then I could rotate it and so on. So when I was rotating it, I was not, it wasn't doing a CPU on the server or anything like this. It downloaded that HTML object, and then I could rotate it on my browser. It's just a browser-based thing. So it's relatively lightweight.
Interesting.
So we had a similar question from Connor, which I think you answered in the chat. That's also about the size of the data, which I think you answered. I was going to ask one thing. Do you envision this as something that would be useful for all figures? Because anyway, you could say, even if it's just a line graph, it could help with the transparency of the data. Absolutely.
So in fact, there's one of the papers from Professor Piero Soli in Italy, and he put all the figures as notebooks, each and every one. So all the data is part of notebooks. That probably was quite a bit of work, but yeah. So I mean, that certainly is, in terms of transparency and availability for others to use. Now others don't have to email Sergio to find to get the data. They just download it from the paper itself. So yes, but again, I should say that writing these notebooks, and making sure that they're usable and work every time and are robust and everything works okay, it's quite a bit of work. It's more than just generating a figure for a paper, because with a figure, okay, the figure looks good, you're done. And here you have to make sure it looks good from every angle and so on. So it is more work, that's for sure. So but I think it's worth it. But again, no obligation for every figure. You can choose whichever, but if someone wants all the figures, that's terrific. I think that's a very good idea.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Any other questions, comments? Probably not. Then if you don't have any other concluding remarks, George, we may end the seminar.
Yeah, maybe just as one concluding remark, sort of extending an invitation for your next JFM paper. Think about including one of these notebooks. I think it does enrich how you communicate with your readers. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the very interesting talk and introducing the notebooks to us. Thank you to everyone for joining, and we'll be putting the link to the seminar online if you want to revisit afterwards.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Thanks. See you soon. Bye.
See ya.